Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am Dr. Vernita Glenn White. I am the CEO and founder of Glenn White Global Solutions, which is a high-level training and development company where we bring practical applications to complex situations. I am also a strategic transformational coach where I help individuals and groups of people break their personal glass ceilings so they can show up more powerfully in their full lives and in their careers. I am on a mission to help people embrace their brilliance because I truly believe that once we show up and be the brilliant people that we truly are using our gifts and talents, we make the world a better place. So if you are joining me, you're new on this journey, welcome. In this series, I am doing the evolution of my career journey, and from being a doctoral student, I talk a little bit about my time as a K-12 teacher and instructional coach. But a lot of the presentations and things that I'm talking about started in my doctoral program, and then things I've done as a college professor, and how has all of that brought me to the decision of becoming a transformational coach and a full-time consultant, speaker, and author. Oh my goodness. People ask me that all the time, and I just thought it would be fun to go back in time. And being in higher education, we don't do resumes, but we do curriculum vitas. And I've looked at all of the things that I've done over the time since as a doctoral student and as a college professor, the number of presentations I've done, the number of articles I've written, and a lot of the other opportunities that I've had the chance to have during that career time or during that span of time. And then I started remembering that everyone didn't come to your conferences. Everyone didn't come to your workshops. Everyone is not going to read your articles, but the information is still valuable or can be useful in some kind of way to someone else. And I've been on this whole thing about being outside of the ivory tower. I think I've done several other videos about that somewhere on my channel. But it's like so much information that we do use as researchers and professors that we keep at the collegiate level, or we write in our professional organizations. Even if you're not a college professor, but anyone who writes in a professional space, they understand what I'm talking about. We go to these national conferences and sometimes international conferences, prepare talks and speeches and research, present, and then we also write about this information. And the people who are benefiting from it are the people who go to the conferences, the ones who are in those professional settings, and the ones who read the journal articles. But a lot of times, the people who need the practical side of that, they're not coming to research conferences and they're not picking up those type of journal articles. So the information sometimes get lost, or it gets lost in translation because someone may pick up like an article, let's say, and they take it and run with it, but then they haven't heard from the person who really wrote it to understand what led up to that, or what are some behind the scenes things or additional information that can be shared to help them in their particular situations. I said this in other videos where there were so many times where people came up to me and were like, hey, that was great, can I have a copy of your presentation? Which, don't ever give a copy of your presentation. Make a PDF version and give them that. And then if you're thinking about running a business, start collecting emails to where they have to input their email and download it. There's just some tips. But people will say, hey, I want your presentation, and then they get it, or the copy, and then they don't really do too much with that, or they try to go back to their schools or districts or wherever and try to implement what you did, but it's not the same. So I'm looking back on it, hindsight, if they would have had like the video version of what I did, or the extra commentary that I include, or even the recorded part of the presentation that was with them live, they could have done so much better. Instead of looking at words on paper, they had the actual person there with them. So that's what I'm doing. I don't really study this information in depth now because I made a transition, but I do take some of the practical things that I've learned and transfer those skills in this direction. In this situation. Also, there are people still probably in this space that want to know more information about what I have to offer and what I have to share. And they could benefit from it. So I'm just building my content library. I'm bringing my CV to life, my curriculum vitae to life, and I'm enjoying the journey and seeing the evolution of my career and realizing that, hey, chick, you got a lot to offer some people. And little PSA, I want to just encourage someone. One, I want to encourage you to join this challenge with me, especially if you're in the professional space and you do this for a living. Go make recordings of yourself and build up your YouTube channel or your website or your LinkedIn page. The other part to that, if you're transitioning from a career to either another career or becoming an entrepreneur or whatever the case may be, sometimes it's a little shaky and scary in the unknown, because it's like, oh man, I don't know how to do that, and we get discouraged. But when we look back over some things that we've accomplished, we can amaze ourselves and use that information and use that evidence to know that we'll be okay in the new environment and in the new situation. So I hope that makes sense. So we are going to talk about my dissertation defense. This is going to be the actual slide deck that I did. If you've been watching the series, I have not changed any of the videos. I haven't changed any of the presentations. I have not looked at them ahead of time. I am doing them live with you. So when I see the slide, when you see the slide, that's when I see the slide. So you may see me fumble or something like, oh, or be surprised by something. I think it's more fun that way. And I've been doing the journey, the evolution. So you've seen some of the other presentations that I've done. And this was the culmination of my doctoral studies when I was at the University of Central Florida to get my PhD in mathematics education. And so let's jump into it. And let me share my screen. Can you still see me in the corner? All right, so I will be reading to you. I am going to try to stick to the slides without adding my commentary. I'm going to try to do that at the end, but we'll see how that goes. I have not been that successful with the other videos because I get so excited and I want to jump in and share. Because of the other part of doing this evolution of career is where was my mind then, and then based on my new experiences and things, where's my perspective now? So So this is my dissertation. You see the dates. I haven't changed anything. It is what it is. So an examination of administrators' knowledge for the standards for mathematical practices. An examination of administrators' knowledge of the standards for mathematical practices. This is my defense. And I did this on July 10th, 2015. Oh my goodness. And let me think. All right, so the transitions are a little slower here. All right, so the agenda, if you've never been to a dissertation defense, this is sort of how it went. Mine was kind of small because I did this on the last date possible for me to graduate on time. Had some issues. You can read about it in my book, Embracing Grit for Greatness. But this was a very rough time for me. This was a hard time for me. This was not a fun process for me, but I loved my research. I loved my topics. I loved my participants. I loved that I was able to do a different type of conceptual framework. So the thing that kept me going was to prove people wrong. I was going to finish in 3 years, but I truly loved my dissertation topic. Some people are like, the best dissertation is a done dissertation. And that is true. But what kept me going after the literal hell I went through was this content. And if you follow my other videos, you'll see how passionate I truly was about mathematics, teaching and learning, and then eventually helping leaders understand mathematics. What came out of this was something so much bigger, and I used those skills, and now I'm seeing the importance of those skills that I learned and transitioning to really executive coaching for people and consulting for people to really move their organizations, and schools are included in organizations and companies, to the next level. So I'm wearing this little tie. My microphone. I'm wearing this tie. I didn't tie it as an actual tie because I just wanted to throw it on. But I wore this for my defense. I'm getting a little teary. I wore this with my defense, and I had on some suspenders, and people were doing their defense, their final, this is my final defense. So people were doing some of theirs in like full suits and things like that. And I was like, nope, I'm not doing that. So I wore some black glasses like these. I wore like a black regular shirt, and I wore a tie, some suspenders, and some slacks, and my heels. Yes. And some people were looking at me like, does Vernita need to tell us something? But I was making that statement. It was like, don't put me in anybody's kind of box, because they were trying to box me in this entire process. So I was making that statement. I was in a different room. I remember I went against the grain this whole time, and I finished my dissertation in 6 weeks. When I say finish my dissertation in 6 weeks, I'm talking about from the time my IRB was approved to this point with my final defense document done. It was 6 weeks. And if anyone knows anything about dissertation process, this is insane. So that means I had to get IRB approval, get my participants. I had to rewrite some chapters because I totally missed something. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. Then I had to collect the data, analyze the data, write up implications and action steps, make sure all of my edits were good, make sure all of my references were good, and prepare for this presentation for this day. So 6 weeks. I think I slept 3 days or 72 hours sporadically over those 6 weeks because I was determined to graduate. I also had a lot of things happening in my personal life, and I've shared this in my book. I don't mind sharing it here, but my mother and grandfather had died in 2012. This is 2015, so I didn't really grieve. I had a few months to grieve, and I was like, I have to go to school because they died in January, February of 2012. I went to school in August of 2012 for my PhD program. And then at this time in 2015, I was fighting with some real estate lawyers and I can't think of the name right now, but some of the courts, a foreclosure, because we were trying to decide what to do at my mother's house. It was a lot of things in between that, but whew, oh my goodness. I was on the verge of having to move out of my mother's home as I was preparing to do this dissertation defense. A transparent moment, had no job offers, but I was graduating in August, and people were trying to tell me, oh, just wait another year until you get a job. And I was like, no, I said I was going to do this in 3 years, so job or no job, I'm getting it done and getting out of here. But I had nowhere to go. Thankfully, I had grandma because I haven't worked this whole 3 years. You can't do too much on between $800 and $1,200 a year. No, I'm sorry, excuse me, not a year, a month. You can't really do too much. And I was in the middle of that, no job, about to be homeless. And I use that term loosely because my grandmother did open her doors to open her home, and and I realized like that's not what people don't. It was a miracle and a blessing that she was able to do that, because there are some people like, look, I don't raise my children and my grandchildren, go figure it out on your own. But she allowed me to come into her home, and yeah, it was a lot happening at this moment. So I had to go in with all of that to make sure that on this day, the last day possible for me to graduate on time, to become Dr. Vernita Glenn White. So all of that to say, in case you forgot, this was an examination of administrators' knowledge for the standards for mathematical practice. And then here's the agenda. I talked about my why, statement of the problem, conceptual framework, research method and design, data analysis, significance, recommendations, and then I opened the floor for questions. Again, I will be reading this to you because you could be an auditory person and you don't necessarily need to look at the screen. But during the defense, I did not read the slides because it's like, this was for the people. I had to know this research in and out. I knew this research in and out. So why this study? Why did I do this study? And again, my frame of reference is a little different. So some of the things that I'm adding now may be different from where I was in 2015. And I don't have my notes because I had some notes waiting for me. So let's see how much I can remember. So I did this study overall because, again, if you've seen the evolution of the other videos, you know what got me to this point. I was tired of seeing school scores rating teachers as high effective and highly effective, or even distinguished, depending on what observational tool your school district used. In my state, it was either Charlotte Danielson or Robert Marzano, those observation tools, but I'm pretty sure there are other observation tools. Those were the only two I focused on for my dissertation because of my geographical location. So I got tired of seeing effective, highly effective, proficient, distinguished teacher ratings when the school scores or the student scores were always low. I was always big into looking at data. Of course, my background is mathematics, and it was like, why do we keep having 30, 60, 40% goals, barely reaching those, but our teachers and our administrators were scoring high on their evaluation exams? That was a problem. That was a disconnect for me. And I felt that administrators who were over certain areas of teachers, so over certain content areas, I felt that they needed to know about that content at a certain level. I came in saying they need to know their mathematics or their science or their reading, but as I was going through the dissertation process and the research process, I was like, okay, maybe you don't need to become a mathematician, because administrators don't control what schools they go to for the most part, and they don't control what subject areas they're going to be supervising or evaluating. So I lightened up a little bit. I said, all right, but you need to know something that's beyond the surface level of going into a classroom, looking if the students are talking to each other, looking to see if all of the check mark items are on the board or in the classroom. And now that we're in a virtual space, more than just if the teacher is posting videos on the learning management system or looking at the discussion board, it was, how are the students truly interacting with the content, and can you tell, right? If a student had to turn and talk, are they talking about that standard that's listed, and are they at the level that they're supposed to be? Can you hear that? Can you look at a student's worksheet and know that it's at the level where it's supposed to be? And if you're observing a teacher and you're looking at his or her lesson plans or their lesson plans, and you're having this discussion, are you able to guide them in the way, or to ask them the right questions to get them to this high level of instruction that they're supposed to be giving to their students? Of course, there was pushback to where they looked at administrators as general leaders or general managers, or just being instructional, and my job is to either motivate you or keep you on task, or making sure that you fit the general competencies. And it was more than that. In my opinion, I was like, no, it's time out for that. We have to do more than that as leaders. Learning just the leadership skills and leadership competencies were not enough if you want to move a school. How now, fast forward, how does this relate to real world? Same thing. If you're a manager or supervisor and you have people under you, and you have to monitor their task, do you know enough about their task to ask them the right questions? Because I've seen so many times where people are like, you don't know what you're talking about, and they do just enough to get by. Now, could the person do better? Absolutely. But if no one's going to call them out, they're going to keep doing what they're doing. And so, not saying that they had to be experts, but these people haven't been into the actual classroom in years, and they are so removed from content, but yet they're in charge of observing and evaluating the teachers. And the same if you think about a corporation. So, a statement of the problem: administrators have been utilizing observation protocols that are not necessarily designed to focus on teacher content knowledge, pedagogical content knowledge, or students' demonstration of their mathematical thinking during instruction. The great thing about my dissertation is that you can insert any content area here and it will still apply. So, support for the problem, I talk about my references. So administrators need to have a sense of what and how a teacher is providing instruction. Observation protocols for general instructional practices are not sufficient, and administrators account for about 25% of a school's impact on student achievement. So my references start from 2001 all the way to 2013 from a variety of resources and researchers, including the creators of those two observation protocols I mentioned, Danielson and Marzano, they specifically said it wasn't meant to be used how it's being used in a lot of our school districts. That came from them. The creators literally said that. So purpose statement. The purpose of this study was to examine what administrators attend to during instruction and how what they notice influences their ability to identify the Common Core state standards and the standards for mathematical practice. Now, at the time of this presentation back in 2015, Common Core state standards had been out, I think, 5 years at this point. At the time of this recording, it is 2021. And there have been a lot of changes of how people associate, how a lot of schools and states associate themselves with the Common Core, but just understanding it didn't matter if it was Common Core state standards or not. It was just standards, academic, instructional, professional standards. Like every one organization, jobs, whatever, they all have standards. So I think a lot of people were upset about how the standards were implemented and what was required of the standards and how the standards were being assessed. But a lot of people didn't really talk about it at that level. They were like, oh, I just hate Common Core. And I was like, but why? So I don't want people to get hung up on this presentation because it's Common Core. My focus was on this second part, the standards for mathematical practice. So it's 8 of them. So if you saw in my other videos, I talk about them. I gave you a general overview about them, but my dissertation, that was a large part of my conceptual framework. And speaking of conceptual framework, here it is. You have knowledge of content and students. So how are students interacting with the content? You have leadership content knowledge, which was, yes, you are a leader. Yes, you have standards and competencies that you know, but how do you use what you know as a leader and blend it with understanding this content? This big part of noticing is, what do you really notice? What do you attend to? Back to what I talked about in my statements. When you walk into these classrooms, what are you really, really noticing? And then S&Ps, which are the standards for mathematical practices, is 8 of them. So my research method and design, I did qualitative using case study techniques. I did a profile of the participants. I categorized the participants. And then I did something new that you typically don't do in mathematics. So why I loved my study so much is because I used psychology, leadership, mathematics, and I think a little bit of medical research to formulate this conceptual framework, this research design, because I didn't want to do the typical teacher content knowledge, or why teachers don't know math, or why students have anxiety, with mathematics. I didn't want to do that because it was like been there, done that. And honestly, that research has been done in the 70s and 80s, and it was like we still have some issues. So I wanted to say there's something bigger to the problem, and that's where I was introduced with my fabulous methodologist, who literally wrote the best article on understanding lit reviews, that is used. I don't know if it's worldwide, but I know it's is out there, pretty popular. But he introduced me to Think Aloud protocols. Now I've kind of found it, but he helped me bring it into the picture and getting to like my research questions. So a Think Aloud protocol, which is fascinating. They do it in the medical industry so much, and it's like, why don't we do that over here? And it's interesting, I'm on a soapbox now. It's interesting how education, the field or the profession of education, is really a hodgepodge of a lot of different other disciplines, right? So the fact that now we're over here to the side and we don't incorporate some of the strategies from our founding disciplines, it's just mind-boggling to me. So Think Aloud protocol includes cognitive interviews, cognitive frames, and then classroom video observations. My research questions: how do administrators' leadership profiles relate to what they notice in the instructional environment? Oh my gosh, the leadership profiles, y'all. I had the best time with those. I'm geeking out. And then the second research question: how does what the administrators notice in the instructional environment relate to their ability to identify students engaging in appropriate standards for mathematical practice within an instructional environment. We went back and forth on these questions. I was like, really, people? When I say I went through hell during this process, it took forever to get to this point. Because if you don't know, you start with your research and then you have your proposal defense and then you got to fix that all up and then you do the, whatever. But it was a lot. So my target population, doctoral program at a university in Florida. So it was leadership. So people who were getting their doctorate degrees in leadership. I think some of them were master level students too. So target is who I was going for. And then some people didn't always meet the qualifications, but that was my target. And then employees at various K-12 schools. So when I said that, leaders that were in there. Okay, so let me back up now. Remember, so doctoral program meaning leadership and doctoral program, and then employees at various K-12 schools. That means administrators at those schools, and then several counties in Florida. I wanted to spread this out as much as possible to have a robust perspective or sample. So reason for population choice, because this is what you do. Everything in a dissertation process is, well, why did you do that? Why did you do that? What does the research say? It's like you can't come up with an original thought. But if you did come up with an original thought, you had to find something that was still close to it. So that's how my people were acting. But anyway, so reasons for population choice. I said I need a variety of perspectives to observe the mathematics instruction, and then administrators make decisions about curriculum. Again, if you've seen any of my previous videos, I was really big on curriculum content knowledge and being able to appropriately select high quality materials that are going to be taught in classrooms. So sample framing, target sample range from 6 to 15. 18 people took my survey. 8 people were eliminated because they did not finish my leadership profile survey. And then 10 completed all areas of the leadership profile survey, but 4 of them were eliminated because they needed experience observing classrooms. And then 6 people were selected. So some people think that you have to have like this huge number to do research, but this is what I tell people now who come to me for dissertation coaching or advice. I was like, look, your dissertation is a practice in research. It is not earth-shattering. You're not going to change the world. Now, some people, when they get the right funding and things, they do, but for majority of us, our work comes after the fact, right? But while we're in school, we're practicing how to do research, right? So sometimes dissertation chairs get into their ego and it's like, chill, I just need to be able to go through this process. So I was able to, my people didn't, when I say my people, my dissertation committee, mainly my chair, they really wanted me to have more people, but I was like, I just need enough to get through this process. And I was able to justify having 6 to 15 with 6 being the minimum based on research. That's another thing to the people who are thinking about getting their doctorate degrees and you're at the dissertation stage or you may be stuck. If you can find research to support your decision, your committee cannot and should not argue with you because you're backing up your claims with research. So I did all of that and 6 people were selected. So my final 6, these were the people and what they did. So I did qualitative, a combination of qualitative and quantitative, but it was mainly qualitative focused. So it was a lot of writing and looking at themes and looking at patterns and things like that. And I remember I was like, I want to be a quantitative researcher because I'm a mathematician. I look at numbers and blah, 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 blah. And I was really good at SPSS and looking at data and interpreting those charts. But anyone who's trying to figure out what type of research, don't get hung up on whether you want to be a qualitative, quantitative, or mixed methods person. It's based on the questions that you want answered. So the questions I really wanted answered just wasn't going to work with the quantitative only. Like I could have just done the survey, got some numbers, but it didn't really answer the questions I wanted answered. So again, don't get hung up on the type, figure out what you really want to answer, and then your questions drive the type of study that you're going to do. So my final 6, there were building or district level administrators, classroom teachers, experience observing classrooms. They completed the leadership profile survey. Some had comfort with mathematics. Some of them had mathematics background, whether it was from high school or college. And then they had the knowledge of instructional leadership standards. Again, I don't know why people were hung up on the Common Core standards, but it was like even teachers have actual standards they have to follow. When you become an administrator, there are standards that you have to follow and know. So I wanted to make sure they had some, like, do you know that you also have standards that you need to know and follow? And then my data collection, oh my gosh, data collection, it was actually fun for me. So all that research that I had done, I came up with I didn't come up with the leadership profile. Well, yes, I did. I compiled it from different sources. So Nelson and Stassi came up with I would say they introduced leadership content knowledge, and they had this whole major project on things that they did. It started off as a grant project, then it turned into this huge thing. And I was fascinated by that. Like, how did they categorize the knowledge of people in the content area, like leaders and administrators? And then I applied it to mathematics. And then I used the instructional, the standards, the leadership standards. I put all that together for them to answer questions and create a profile based on that. Oh my gosh, I loved it. It was fascinating to me. And then even like the people on my committee, especially the leadership professor who actually became dean later. I think she became dean while I was still there. She was amazed by that. And I was like, yes, I'm going to go out there and change the world. And then the second thing I did was a Think Aloud protocol. That was fascinating to me because I think I get, let me reserve. I think I get to this later on. I think I break these down later on. And then I did the S&P's follow-up interview. Remember, those are standards for mathematical practice follow-up interview. So data collection, phase 1. It included demographics. It included their mathematics background and their positions and their comfort with mathematics. And then knowledge of level of leadership, instructional leadership, and then classroom reflection scenarios. That's what I was talking about with Nelson and Stassi. They came up with this whole thing about how people reacted to reading classroom scenarios and what advice would they give to that teacher. And then they put them in different phases they categorized them at different levels of understanding the content as leaders. And I'll talk about that later on. So that's what was part of the leadership profile. They had to read these scenarios and provide their thoughts. The second part was 2 classroom videos. I wanted to do public use because if I was to replicate this, and which I did now I can't even think of the name, a beta. So I did a beta study first, and then I did my actual study. And the point of doing research is for it to be replicated. So I didn't want to have these videos where no one else could get a hold of them. I wanted them to be any videos that they can find so that they can still go through the same process. Now, I was originally supposed to use these videos from my dissertation chair that she had created for another project, but then somehow she got amnesia, and I was like, okay, well, don't worry about it. And this actually came up better because her videos were only for the publisher, the textbook publisher's use anyway. So I wouldn't have been able to, that would have been a limitation to my research. But I avoided that limitation by making the videos from public use. So even if someone doesn't use these exact videos, they'll still be able to follow the steps of my research. All right, so I did 5th and 6th grade, and then I did 7th grade. I wanted to have a variety of grade levels. I didn't want to go too low, didn't want to go too high. I wanted to be in a comfort zone, and then something that was easy to interpret the standards for mathematical practice. So video raters, I had people because I knew what I was looking for, but I also validated my videos to see if people would pick the same standards for mathematical practices that I did, because I didn't want to be biased. So I could have watched the video and said, oh, I see this practice, and this practice. And then the website that I used with the videos, they had their own interpretation of which practices were used. And then, so it's not me against and the video only, I asked, let me see, 1, 2, 3 other people to watch the videos from various levels of mathematics understanding. So that means students, professors, an elementary professor, and then the secondary professor, to see if they saw the same things I did. I think it's inter-rater reliability, to make sure. So that was another good thing. Like, these were good videos. So then phase 3. Now I'm talking to you, kind of casual and things like this, but when I was in the actual defense, I was going into more detail about these topics, because the purpose of a dissertation defense, and this is what I was told, and this is from my experience, the more you get out during your presentation, the less questions you have on the other side. So 1, be a good writer, get an editor if you need to, and then have a solid presentation, because you don't want to be grilled. And I've literally seen some dissertation defenses that did not go well. You want to know your stuff. All right, so I did S&P's follow-up interviews. I created the Standards for Mathematical Practice Identification form. Again, I used a combination of different things to create tools. So I found, so I used the coaching cycle, where you have a pre-observation, the observation, and the post-observation. And in the post-observation, what typically happened, an administrator would go in, they would say their notes, they would take their notes, and they would discuss them with the teacher. But it would just be from their frame of thinking, right? Or it'd be from their notes, but it wasn't anything to keep them content focused or content specific. So with this form I had, it was like, look, yes, you had your notes and you had your thoughts, but let's keep it in the context of mathematics instruction. So it was kind of like a framework, like bumper rails. Like, these are some of the questions that you can ask your teacher after you did the observation. So included student and teacher action for each S&P. A lot of people thought it was only things that the students were supposed to do in the classroom, but I was like, no, the teachers have their responsibility as well. And as an observer, it's easier to go in knowing what to look for and knowing what to notice versus general practices, especially if you are supposed to support a high level or a high interest content area like mathematics. And then I said it was a tool with mathematics examples and attention to students. So again, I didn't want them to go in there blind or generalize. I wanted them to have a specific focus after they watched the video. So know that in interview, those actual teachers in the videos, that's a limitation, but as administrators, I want them to get into the practice of what would you have said. All right, classroom reflection video scenarios. It was a 4th grade division lesson. There were 5 reflective questions. 3 of them asked, what was the teacher doing? Was it evidence-based or not? And then why? And then the other 2 questions were, what were the mathematical ideas involved in this scenario? And what can students learn from this class? If you get high level questions like this, the teacher then truly gets to shine as an expert. And then you as the leader, you will know if that teacher knows their content or not. And the other part, this was the fun part I was talking about, especially part of the leadership profile survey that I did based on the researchers Nelson and Stasi. It was either you don't know mathematics. So it wasn't just the surveys, it was a series of questions that the participants had to answer along with reading the classroom scenarios. And then I had to go back and analyze what they said and then group them based on what Nelson and Stasi had determined from just the leadership content knowledge, and then based on what they did in their leadership instructional survey. So remember, my survey was robust because I was developing a profile of the type of leader. right? So they were categorized as no mathematics. Like, you don't know anything. You can't recognize beyond 2 + 2. And that's real talk. Like, there are some people who are like, I don't know any math. And then modest mathematics in use, expanding mathematics in use, and attending to mathematical thinking, and then big picture. So these were just the levels of the person, the leader's understanding of mathematics in general. And then reading it in context of a classroom scenario. Hope I'm not boring you, but this was so fun to me. All right, so classroom reflection scenario, I had 3 groups. There were 3 of them in the modest mathematics in use, and that was Kelly, Zach, and Lisa. Let's see if you can figure out these names and where these names came from. There were 2 in the expanding mathematics in use, and then there was 1 in the attending to mathematical thinking. Samuel was amazing. Samuel knew mathematics and physics, which physics is technically, to me, mathematics, but his view and understanding of mathematics surpassed what he needed to be a math teacher or a principal. He knew math. Like, that was his thing. Jesse and Slater, I think they took, am I remembering, at least math in college. Like, they weren't math majors, but they took enough mathematics in college or one of their degrees or something like that. So their last time seeing mathematics wasn't in high school or entry-level math class in college. Like, they took more than the average person who doesn't do mathematics or major in mathematics. They took more mathematics than, like I said, the general or intro-level math that you needed for college. And then Kelly, Zach, and Lisa, they were the last time I took math was maybe in high school, and then they probably took an intro math class in college, college algebra, and then they had to take the statistics course in their doctoral program or something like that. So they were not really math people, but they had to take a little bit more math, but less than Jesse and Slater, and definitely significantly less than Samuel. So think aloud protocol major themes. Remember, well, you may not know, part of the reason why I did this study is because administrators were focusing on general practices, like, are the students compliant? Are they raising their hands? Do they look engaged, which was really compliancy? Being compliant. Was the teacher standing up? Was the teacher walking around? Did the teacher ask so many number of questions? Was the standard posted on the board? All the surface level stuff. So what I wanted to uncover, what came about the going through the Think Aloud. So let me back up. The Think Aloud process was, in a classroom observation, a person takes notes, right? And then they discuss those notes. Even if they're watching a video, you have your thoughts, but you're taking notes as well. You have time from what you see originally can change from what you actually write on the paper. In the medical profession, when they're going through steps, and I think I got this from architecture too, but it was mainly medical. When they're going through a process, they speak it out. They don't think about it. Whatever comes out, what they see is what they speak. A lot of times they will record what they're doing, and as they're going along, like cutting this part of the body here, I'm diving in, I'm noticing that the skin is this, or the liver is this, or this, that, and the other. They're talking out the process. So, and people are like, why would you do this? But think about it. And this is what I've noticed. The notes that the administrators write are vastly different than what they paid attention to in the classroom. Because and I won't get too deep, but it was very different. And I wanted the pure original thoughts, like, no, that thought right there, what are you saying? So I recorded them, and then I transcribed them. So that's how I came to understanding the themes. So when I said I wanted to get to what was happening, I literally got to what was happening, because a lot changes from your eyes to your minds to your hand. So Think Aloud protocol major themes: attention to students' interaction during instruction, attention to content, instructional leadership language, teacher questioning strategies, and use of assessments and student inquiry. For the S&P's follow-up interview, we continued the Think Aloud protocol, the standards for mathematical practice identification form. So this was, what did they use after they did the interview, like if they were going to follow up with the teacher. And then I analyzed using the conceptual framework lens, the content, that graphic I showed, the content knowledge of students, the leadership content knowledge, the noticing, and then the standards for mathematical practice. So my findings: noticing in the classroom, teacher instruction behaviors, students' behaviors, non-content related, teacher and student interactions with content based on understanding mathematics, teaching and learning. And then they confirmed the research that administrators really don't focus on content. Again, my background is mathematics, but this was a lot of, you can insert any content area. Teachers did do better, and administrators were better at understanding reading, because a lot of them get those additional reading certifications, or a lot of them were reading teachers or English language arts teachers before they moved into administration. So my additional findings were, and these were my participants, and you'll see the amount of people that focused on the students, the teacher and student content, the standards for mathematical practices between the teacher and the students, and then leadership. Slater focused the most on the student and the teacher content. Remembering him, he knew mathematics, but he was very like leadership business type of administrator. But I just want you to look at this and really see how some of them, like where their focus was. And think about it, if you're in a school and then you have, let's say, a principal and 3 to 4 assistant principals, and they're all doing observations differently or evaluations differently, some people, and then you wonder why some people get affected, distinguished, highly effective, and then student scores are not where they are, because they're all over the place on what to focus on. It is so much to focus on when you walk into these classrooms. So part of my goal was to narrow the focus and go deeper. So then it says the ability to identify the standards for mathematical practices. Again, at the time I did my research study, the practices the standards for mathematical practices they haven't been out that long. They were out in a different type of setting, like in a different way, but then they were revamped and recategorized and restructured, and then they became the 8 standards for mathematical practice. You can say which ones noticed certain things, and then I rated them against what I rated and then what my video raters rated, to see if they could actually pick up on the practices. Now again, you don't need all 8 of them in every single classroom, every single lesson, because that's ridiculous. And then, but you do hit between 1 to 3 of them in every lesson, in my opinion, based on what I've seen and observed and researched. So then I looked at the ability to identify the S&Ps in video 2. You notice that some of them were picking things that were not even listed, but I thought it was very interesting, and I was happy that they, said that they saw certain things. So one way I saw this was like, I don't think you understand what that S&P means, or I think you're just doing blanket stuff. So you just throwing darts with your eyes closed, and hopefully that you hit something. And then I showed. So after they did the profile, I analyzed that. They watched the videos, I analyzed that, and then I gave them the tool. So the tool was, again, they had the S&Ps listed, and then they had student actions and teacher action for each S&P, and they were supposed to go back and rate what they saw based on those actions. So remember, I recorded them as they were talking when they were watching the video. So I had to take what they were actually saying in the video and analyze that, and then what they actually wrote on the tool. So I hope that made sense. So I had to analyze, like they were watching a video and they're used to just keeping the thoughts in their head and writing on paper, but I said, no, talk it out. Don't write anything down. So as the teacher in the video is doing it, like, oh, I noticed this and that person is doing that. So yeah, I had to listen to things several times and transcribe their words and come up with themes. And then I had to use what they said in those videos, and I had to compare it to what they said as they were doing the S&P tool. And I recorded that as well. So I had the actual document, but I still wanted to hear their thoughts as well. So then you'll see who paid attention to what after the tool. So this was unexpected findings. Classroom reflection scenario for my leadership profile survey. When given a specific task or targeted focus, the administrators were able to use more mathematical language and describe how both the teacher and students interacted with the content. Ideal category, the modest mathematics in use, the expanding mathematics in use, and the attending to mathematical thinking. This was huge for me. This was huge because the original classroom observation protocols from Danielson and Marzano are very surface level. Nothing against them. These people made millions of dollars off that tool. So I'm not mad at the tool, but the creator said this was not for evaluating teachers. Now, since y'all wanted to use that way, cool, we'll ride out with that. But that was not the original intent for the tool. It was sort of like a checklist. Like, is this happening? To make sure that we all kind of are doing, the bumper rails, right? So all this time it was like, why aren't you focusing on the content? And I was like, because you need to know math. And while I still believe that any administrator, even me as a mathematics person, when I would have to go into other classrooms, I still had to have some level of understanding of what that standard was so I can ask the appropriate questions. So when the administrators got this tool that gave them those bumper rails, their mathematics knowledge or the types of questioning and the language they use increased, became more mathematical, meaning that it was more targeted and they were able to support the teacher. They were able to ask the right questions instead of why aren't the students, engaged? And it was like, what? I don't know. Compared to, I noticed that when you asked this particular question, the students hesitated, but if you would have done this teacher action based on the tool, how do you think things would have been differently? And I'm just giving you this example because I don't have the actual tool in front of me, but it gave them exact wording. Well, not exact wording, but it gave them, like I said, specific language as it related to the standards for mathematical practice. It gave them that language so that the teacher felt even more confident that the administrator was paying attention and could have a conversation. Again, I've learned the leaders don't need to be the content expert, but they still need to know enough to be able to identify what's happening in the classroom and then be able to support that teacher to get to that next level of impact. Because they are responsible for 25% of the impact, and that is huge, really. So the significance, why? So it facilitates more understanding of how administrators think about mathematics instruction. They did not totally miss the mark about the S&Ps, so that was great. So a lot of them, before they came in, was like, we don't know what the standards for mathematical practice are, but they actually did, especially when it's given a tool. They're like, oh yeah, I actually saw that. And then when they didn't have to, what they saw, they didn't have to filter it all out through their leadership skills. They were able to combine both. Because what I was noticing and in the research is that they will see all the math happening, but because they were trained a certain way, all of that gets thrown out and their only focus was on the leadership standards. And it was like, okay, that really doesn't help the classroom or the teacher. So now they've added the content part, and that's where you get the leadership content knowledge. So that's why I said they did not totally miss the mark for the S&Ps. And how does this contribute to the leadership, to the literature? I was like, administrators were not blank slates. And some people thought that was offensive, but sometimes if you're an administrator, and I have administrator friends, sometimes you be showing up in these classrooms like, you really don't know what's going on in here, right? Sometimes they do come across like that, but it's really not their fault. After studying a lot of leadership preparation programs, they have to know about law. And I know from my own master's program, school law, budget, finance, general stuff about instruction, and all of the leadership stuff. So no content. So it's like they had to dump all that out from what they learned from their K-12 and some college experiences, that only focus on that. So they had these blinders on, and they would be, it's almost like they were brainwashed, like, I don't know this subject area. And it was like, yes, you do. You just blocked it because you were so focused on this leadership stuff. And then it says provides insight into conversations about administrator content knowledge, what I just said, and then provides further information about observation protocols. A content-specific tool did not change the role of the administrator. And those were not my words, but I found that, and this was 2003, I did my study in 2015. Some people were like, oh, it's like a cheat tool. And it was like, no, they're still the leader. They still have all of those competencies and standards that they must follow. All they did was just add the language of the mathematics, but the language of the subject. And that just made them a more powerful leader. So not only do I know how to lead you in general, I can actually support you on what you're having issues with. And the role of a leader is really like a coach, and this is my new perspective, not to give you the answers. Like, I'm not going to tell you what you need to do to be the great mathematics teacher because you're the content expert. However, I can ask you the right questions to pull out the answer that's already inside of you, or to make you go do your own research in your specific area. See, I get really excited. So my limitations, these results could not be generalized to the broader population of administrators. I was like, yes, they can. But because I had 6 participants, I was like, okay, fine. So not a wide range of classroom videos. And it really wasn't. And it's funny because I was like, all these videos, all these teachers that have these YouTube channels and things out there weren't enough at this time for where people could have open access to watch classrooms. You got a lot of privacy laws and things like that, but it was hard to find videos that you can use as teaching tools. So that's what I meant, not a wide range of classroom videos. Leadership profile survey involved a self-assessment, so people could lie. They could say they are like super mathematically inclined, or they know all of their leadership standards and things like that. But honestly, when people knew I was doing research, I felt like they were being honest. And if anything, probably downplayed what they knew, or So it can be a limitation, but I still think people were honest for them. I think they were all honest. Think aloud, classroom videos. The reason why that's a limitation, because you have to talk out loud. And so I couldn't do this. I had to do these one-on-one. So if I had to replicate this, I would have to find a way to either have more participants and spread them out, or put them, I would have to figure out, like, are we just doing headphones and make sure they record in their own little area or something like that. So that was a limitation, because they got to talk out loud. And it would be difficult to do that in a large group at once. There was not sufficient differentiation between the sample. They were, I think they were all Caucasian or white. That was a limitation. The categorization of the small sample size produced an unequal number of administrators in each group. Yes, it was 3-2-1 in each of those groups of the type of mathematical knowledge that they knew. And my recommendations: examination of high school mathematics courses. I do is like what I do. And this is just mathematics. But if you're going to be an administrator over science, then it was like, well, how much science did you take? And I think that's important. Because this is what I learned when I went to Singapore, and I met with like the Minister of Education. I think that's what they call them. And he was like, he doesn't understand why teachers struggle to teach, and why people are like, oh, I don't teach this level. Or he was like, I don't even know why we specialize, at a certain level. Like, if you go off to college and do all that, yeah, but to be a teacher. And I said, why do you say that? He was like, you should be able to teach anything. You went to school for 12 years. So why don't you know this stuff? And I was like, what? So it's true. It's like, I should still know all the science from what I did when I was in school. I may need to brush up on some things, but it shouldn't be brand new. I shouldn't be afraid to talk about science or make connections for science and something from my from what I learned in English. And I was like, you know what? We don't do that. We still compartmentalize, except if you're an elementary teacher. And even with that, you don't go at the level in each subject to really make those connections. So I was like, yeah, we should examine like what courses they took in high school and maybe college, and not to exclude them, but just say, oh, well, maybe when we do these preparations programs or have these consultants or trainers come in, this is what we need for our people. So think aloud protocols of mathematics classrooms via Skype or FaceTime. That's how I could get more done, because I physically went to meet these people, and I was like, I need to finish in time. So I was showing up at their job. I was showing up at conferences. I was like, where are you? I'm coming to you, because I wanted to be finished. And then, so if I could have done this virtually, and you know, after being in the global pandemic, it's like, duh, that's a great way to do it. So we would be on, I would turn my camera off. They could watch the video and talk, and I could still record them and still get the same results. Focus on specific S&P, either identified by the teacher during a pre-conference session or by the researcher. So here, there are 8 mathematical practices. The recommendation would be, go when you do the coaching cycle. In the pre-conference, ask your teacher, hey, what do you want to focus on? And if they say, I want to focus on practice 3, cool. Then their lesson plans, when you look at it, should have elements of S&P 3 in there. When they do their instruction, you should see elements of S&P 3 in there. So your only focus is that teacher doing this particular thing versus having, and then I showed the teacher actions and student actions so that they had actual examples of what this looks like, versus walking into a classroom and using the general checklist, and it's like, for what? So narrowing the focus here to better support the teacher. An adaptation of the leadership profile survey with additional grade level classroom scenarios. Yes, my grade level scenarios were mainly elementary. So I would definitely love to have scenarios for secondary level as well, because secondary gets left out so many times in these research areas. And it would have been more robust to have a wider range of classroom scenarios. And then a large, more diverse sample size. Of course, the more people that you have in research, the better. And then I will also include aspiring administrators. Now, I did have some aspiring administrators. I did interview them, and I had that research. I just didn't include it in my dissertation because I didn't know what I was going to find. I was just collecting, I was just doing data collection, and I didn't know which way it was going to go. So I do actually have the data for the aspiring administrators, but I chose not to use it because I had the sample of the actual administrators already. So if I would do this again, it would be great to catch them early to go through this process before they are placed in schools. So then, of course, I asked my committee if they had any questions. I'll stop share here. I asked them if they had any questions, and I took a huge, it was a huge sigh of relief. And let me tell you this secret. Before I even started, my methodologist, who was like my right-hand guy through this whole thing, he was like, I don't have any questions, so we'll just let her go through this and be done. And the other people on the committee were like, oh yeah, she did a great job while I was reading. So going in, they didn't know I heard them. Going in, I got a little more confident because I was like, okay, they're not gonna grill me. But I didn't want to become cocky because things could have changed based on the presentation I did. And then of course my chair, she couldn't let that go by because there's no such thing as a perfect defense. She wanted to grill me, and then that sparked some other questions from people. But nothing hard, but it was like, really, these are the questions you're asking me? Because my proposal defense was like, my methodology and my chair were going at it, and I was just like, they're like, so a lot of things came up during my proposal defense, and I made sure I had to address those so that we didn't have that at my dissertation defense. And I was able to answer the questions. And here's a tip: if you don't know, don't get up there and guess. Be like, I don't know what that is. And take a moment before you say that, and then back it up with something, you know, based on it's a limitation, or I didn't get that far, this wasn't available. But don't make up stuff, because then that opens the door and you could be there a lot longer than what you need to be. So again, I know, hopefully that made sense to you. My goal was to write like research articles and things like that based on this. I may go back and do that. I am in the process of creating a course for that and making that part of a coaching package that I do, or consulting package that I do, because I still think it's very important of how this information can be utilized, not just only in mathematics, not just in K-12, but in organizations and businesses as well. My dissertation is public, by the way, if people want to go read it. Don't judge me on my writing back then, but I think I did pretty good. So the dissertation is public. The last time I checked, it was like over 150 something downloads, and that's still kind of small. But then it's like, oh, 150 y'all wanted to read what I wrote. And I don't know if anyone continued this research or followed it. I don't know, but I could research that and see. But I'll bring this back to life for real, because it has a significant influence on me wanting to be the type of coach that I am, and then wanting the type of clients that I want to have, because I like affecting people who have the most impact and influence on change. I like working with those people. And now I see it as my evolution of my own career as to why I want those particular types of clients. Now, I'll work with anyone if we're a good fit. Like, you don't have to be in this top leadership role, because remember, I still do individual coaching as well. But I like people who have like impact and influence, or want to increase their impact and influence. All right. That's all I have for you. I hope it made sense to you. Please ask me questions down below. I would love, if you have your doctorate degree, I would love to hear what your study was. And I invite all of you to join this challenge to do the evolution of your career and bring your CVs or your resumes to life, and share your wealth of knowledge to someone who you could be someone. I told you, you could be someone's solution to their problem, either individually or as a group. Whew. All right. So thank you so much. Clearly, I passed my dissertation defense because I am Dr. Glenn White. But yeah, if you have questions about that or support, you can always comment down below, or find me on social to message me. My information is down here below somewhere, so we can connect, because I love supporting people through this process how I can. Thank you so much for listening and learning with me. And remember this: to be well, to be empowered, to be bold, and be brilliant. Until next time, bye.